faster than a speeding typewriter, more powerful than a printing press, able to speak over tall buildings in a single sound. Look, up on the dial!
It's a conservative!
It's a liberal! It's Supermouth! Yes, it's Supermouth, strange visitor from the past with powers and abilities far beyond those of mortal talk show hosts. Supermouth, who can change the course of local politics, bend ears with his bare mouth, and who, disguised as Mike Wiley, mild-mannered reporter for a great metropolitan radio show, fights a never-ending battle for truth, justice, and the American way.
Okay, we're recording. Good morning. This is Mike Wiley and The World This Week with Mike Wiley. And today's show is going to be centered around what we as the American people need to do to help fix this country. Now, we just had some good news as of yesterday with the Iowa caucus, in which Donald Trump scored over 50% of the vote. And that's good news. Vic Ramaswamy dropped out and endorsed Trump, which we knew he would do. Haley and DeSantis will hang around as long as they have money because they're enjoying the limelight, and then they're starting to basically run for 2028. So they're basically done. It's basically over. The only problem is that the Democrats still exist. And as long as the Democrats exist, we know that funny stuff's going to happen. We've seen too much of it. And it brings us to a question as to what they are actually doing. You know, I can understand political activity, and I can understand why political issues are done that way. Why some people like to cheat on a regular basis on elections like the Democrats. And so we discussed and we advertised that this was going to be the beginning of the treason trials. And we've gone through and we have documentation and video, which we're going to be playing over the next several weeks of this series. Because this is going to be the initial stage of the treason trials or the war crimes trials. And the reason why I say that is because when you look at what's being done, you sometimes wonder, are the Democrats actually at war with us? You know, I can see if once in a while these tactics by the Democrats were we're just, oh, what a surprise, they did this. But it seems that the policy of the Democratic Confederate Party, and the reason why I call them the Confederate Party is because when you do your analysis, when you look at research and see what history is telling you has happened, there is the truth and then there is opinion, and you have to try to merge everything together to come to a conclusion as to why what's going on is going on. And we know, a lot of us knew about the January 6th fraud and everything. Matter of fact, let me just read this to you. I'm going to interject these things as we go through them. I've got quite a bit to review with you. Obstruction of justice is the impediment of government activities. Okay. There are a host of federal criminal laws that prohibit obstruction of justice. The 6 most general outlaw obstruction of judicial proceedings is witness tampering, witness retaliation, obstruction of congressional or administrative proceedings, conspiracy to defraud the United States, and a contempt or a creature of common law. All but Section 1503, some cover congressional activities. So, one of the things that they did when they filed one of the complaints against Trump, the false impeachments, and they were all Both impeachments were fake. And we know that quite well. The document history shows that the Senate's overturned both of them. Thank God we had enough Republicans with some sense. Otherwise, who knows how much this nation would be destroyed now. Right now, we've only been destroyed by 3 years of Biden. It could have been more. Obstruction of congressional or administrative proceedings. This is what's being used against Americans who went to Washington, D.C. for a Stop the Steal rally. Now, why was it called Stop the Steal? Did some people think the 2020 election was stolen? Which is awfully weird. I mean, who would think that the 2020 election was stolen besides me? Okay. I mean, I've gone through quite a bit of the evidence. It's obvious what they did. But there's some underlying concepts and reasons of why what is being done by the Democrats is being done by the Democrats. And I think we need to understand why they're doing it, what the outcome is going to be from their standpoint. When will they completely decide they have victory over America? And when are we going to decide that it's not really treason? Because in order for it to be treason, they would have to be Americans. But what if they aren't Americans? What if they are Confederates? What if they are still of the Confederate nation in perpetuity? I know you could think that sounds kind of nuts, Mike, but when I take you through this and understand the Confederacy was a concept to employ a program of making sure the wealthy stayed wealthy and the poor stayed poor. And one of the greatest things that shows that to you is the true story of the Free State of Jones. It's a movie with Matthew McConaughey in it. And I saw it a second time and some stuff just jumped out at me. And because of my research and everything and coming to the conclusion that we basically are at war with the Democratic Party, and the difference between a war and a battle is that a battle happens once, maybe once in a while. A war is constant. People or a country or an entity is at war with you for a period of time until you're done, you're destroyed, and they win. And we have to come to the conclusion that the Democratic Party just doesn't want to fight for their scenarios, but they want to fight to destroy our scenarios, our republic. They keep claiming that we're a democracy. We're not really a democracy. If we were, then we wouldn't have had the Founding Fathers create a republic. A republic is a nation of laws. Laws that the Democrats totally ignore, don't want to follow, and that main law is the Constitution of the United States. They violate it all the time, and they grossly violated it in 2020. That evidence is obvious. Everyone knows it, but we have a problem in this country. And the problem is that there is a fifth state, if you will, and that fifth state is the media. Washington Post, New York Times, Associated Press, United Press International, Reuters, ABC, NBC, CBS, CNN, MSNBC, and our nation. Oh, also public broadcasting, which we pay for. It's amazing. The United States taxpayers pay for an organization to present us with news that nobody else is supposed to going to tell us, but they're all in the same league. Why we're paying for it, I have no idea. And I would like to see that when Trump wins re-election, and if he survives re-election, that public broadcasting is turned over to Americans to run and to have it cover American stories, American issues, the American truth. Because our nation needs to understand what it's been going through, why we've suffered for so long. And the purpose of today's show is to basically say, okay, we have for the past year. Now, let me just state that if you want to see past shows that I have done, you can go to rumble.com, and you look in for the Wiley Information Network. That's the channel, and you'll see our shows there that we've done in the past. And now we're also on YouTube, and this will be produced through YouTube and then sent out through Getter, Truth Social, and Rumble. We'll put it up on Rumble as well, so that everybody has a chance to see it and understand what we're trying to do. And what we're trying to do is to end this cycle of stupidity and ignorance. We've been at war probably with the Democrats since, let's see, they fired on Fort Sumter in, I believe it was April of 1861. And then they fired on President Lincoln in April of 1865, April 15th to be exact. That's why the federal government charges, make sure we have to have our taxes in by April 15th to remind us that they killed Abraham Lincoln, and that's the name of that tune. And they've done a lot more. We're going to cover it today. Now, one thing that I want you to understand is, at what point in time are you going to stop sitting back and letting the media tell us what to do and how we should look at things? You know, it's interesting. I have this coffee mug, and for some reason, it seems that the coffee mug no longer holds the heat as much as it used to. Maybe it's time for me to get some new coffee mugs. So, what I'm trying to say to you is this. The only people you can trust to help save this nation is you and your neighbors. Now, there is an organization, I've invited them to come on the show, and they, for some reason, have said, no, we're on enough shows. We don't have to be on any more shows. Yeah, I know that mostly if you have an organization or if you're advertising something or you're trying to build your audience, you go to as many possible places as you can, but for some reason they're not thinking that way. So there's got to be something else in their conclusion. I would look into them. They're called Civil Tactics. And it's an organization that has basically been working on my concept, which was that we have to go back to the courts, the counties. And we have to use county courts, county sheriffs, and county attorney generals, county grand juries to fight the crime, because Washington, D.C. is not. Okay, Washington, D.C. is no longer part of the United States of America. And we know that because that's why most of these Americans that are in jail for January 6th are in D.C. Because D.C. doesn't follow the laws of the United States. They follow the laws of the Democrat Empire. That's why when they file these stooge court cases and lawsuits, they always use grand juries in District of Columbia, or they use the courts in District of Columbia, and they're all infiltrated with far-left lunatics. And there's nothing we can do about that until we decide to go to war to fix it. And yes, I said war, to fix it. You know, my thought process has always been that the Democrats are basically committing crimes. And we have the history of all the crimes they've committed. However, the extensive continuation of the crimes and the ultimate reasons for the crimes leads you to a different conclusion. And the conclusion is that the Democratic Party is actually at war with us. Okay? Everybody out there, I just want you to sit back and think, when did you have great economic success when a Democrat was in the White House? How much money did you make while the Democrats were in the White House? All I know is that when Democrats in the White House, I become poor. When Republicans in the White House, I become healthy with some wealth. This was the greatest thing that Donald Trump did, but the Democrats didn't care. They had to be in power. The number one issue for Democrats is for them to be in power. They need to be in power. That's it. That's it in a nutshell. If they're not in power, they're not happy. They just want to take their toys and go home. But if you look at this map over here, the Democrats control the blue zones. That's how they stole the 2020 election. With an organization called GBI Strategies, which is a black organization run by a black Democrat who created 20 offices in the country to go out and find people who weren't going to vote, who were in the black communities, and fill out fake paperwork for them. And, you know, the fake 15 million ballots had to have names on them. Okay, you can't just print up fake ballots, you have to have a name on them. And then, of course, you're supposed to have a signature. And the reason why the Democrats filed a fake lawsuit at the major states, battleground states, so that they could fix the election by allowing ballots to come in without signature verification. That's ridiculous. And of course, all of that's illegal. All of that was violation of law, the Constitution, because the state legislatures, which in most of these states are Republican, they're the ones, Article 1, Section 4, are responsible for the manner in which federal elections are done. If you want to see exactly how that's brought out, just go to the congressional record of, let's say, January 6, 2021. Okay, that was an operation committed by the Democratic Party to complete the steal of the 2020 election. And based on information I have, the January 6th stealing was acknowledged from the beginning, because you have to understand the Democrats plan this stuff out years in advance. Okay, Barack Obama is basically the kingpin of this. Yes, we had the Clintons, and yes, the Clintons committed several criminal acts and murdered people for electoral processes. And if they want to come after me for defamation, come on. Because, you know, the truth defeats defamation. So unless you're in a D.C. court, then whatever the Democrat says, that's what's considered the truth. So I've put together a documentation. I have video that we're going to be playing, because I'm convinced that treason is not the answer. And the reason being is, and let me just read to you. Hold on 1 second. Get everything nice and neat. Have everything nice and neat. I've got them in these little piles. I have my definitions. Where are you? Okay. That's that. Okay. Treason. Treason is the crime of betraying one's country, especially by attempting to kill the sovereign or overthrow the government. Okay? Sedition is conduct or speech inciting people to rebel against the authority of a state or monarch. I would think that it was sedition that was committed by the Democrats through speech to incite people to rebel against the authority of the state. In this case, Donald Trump. They wanted a rebellion against Donald Trump. Now, as I was putting this together, I came to the conclusion, excuse me, it's that time of year where stuff gets in your lungs and your throat dries out real quick. An act of war The term act of war means an act occurring in the course of A, a declared war, B, armed conflict, whether or not war has been declared between two or more nations, C, armed conflict between military forces of any origins. Now, the Democrats do not have their own army, but they do have control of the FBI, the CIA, and the majority of all government operations, federal operations in the country. And their capital is D.C., not our capital. District of Columbia is not the capital of the United States. It's the capital of the Democrat domain, or the Confederacy, if you will. Because let's not forget that war was began a while ago by the Democrats in the battle of the attack on Fort Sumter. We fought a war for 4 years, and then supposedly the Democrats had surrendered, had Appomattox Courthouse, the Army of West Virginia, General Lee, surrendered to Grant. But then 5 days later, the Democrat politicians decided to go ahead and assassinate the Republican president, Abraham Lincoln. Now, why would they assassinate Abraham Lincoln? Well, the major reason was because in an effort to try to unify the nation, when Lincoln was reelected, he chose a Democrat as his vice president. And that's a lesson to every Republican to never pick a Democrat as your vice president, because you'll be in the ground quicker than you can say Happy New Year. There's a Latin phrase. It's called casus belli, and it means occasion for war. Casus belli is an act or an event that either provokes or is used to justify a war. Now, we're going to go through a list of things. And this is the first part of a series of shows, because I did not look to see when we started. Maybe we've been doing this for 20 minutes. But I'd like to get these shows to about no more than 90 minutes. And this would be a long show, because we've got quite a few Democrats that we believe have committed, it's not treason. And the reason why it's not treason is because if they come from one of these blue zones, that's another country. The blue is a separate country from the United States, because these blue areas are not united with us in anything. They aren't. They are not. You can say, "Oh, Mike, you don't know what you're talking about." But I believe that one of our most popular suggestions and shows was the divorce, that we should divorce ourselves from the Confederate Democrats once and for all. And if they want to do their dog junk, let them go ahead and do it. But we shouldn't be affected by it. So, for instance, you look up the state of Washington, see that about 2/3 of Washington is red, and 1/3 of Washington is blue. Just south of it is Oregon. Oregon is mostly red, except for a little sliver along the coast where you find most communist Confederate elitists. They love to be on the coastline. Look at California. California along the coastline is all Confederate Democrat, but you'll see the largest amount of mass in California is in East California. Nevada. Now, Nevada shows that half is blue and half is red, but it's not really that at all. The blue part is basically Las Vegas, Clark County, where I used to live. And the Democrats have had strong control of that for a while, mainly because of the unions, because of the union employees, okay, in the hotels and the casinos. In Colorado, we just noticed that they tried to get they took Trump off the ballot. And of course, that occurred in that blue area, okay? The attacks on the United States take place in the blue areas. You want to know what areas committed the election fraud? Look at the blue areas. The blue areas under control. Look at Minnesota. Look at the whole state of Minnesota. Probably 85% of the land, no, probably 90% of the landmass of Minnesota is controlled by Republicans. But all the government agencies are run by Democrats in Minneapolis. They have 4 congressional seats and 2 Senate seats, all Democrat, because they stick people into a certain area. Barack Obama brought 81,000 Somalis and stuck them right into Minnesota. Okay, what you're looking at is you're looking at an actual plan that no one's ever really paid attention to, but it's the Confederacy. Okay, it's the new Confederacy. The Democrats had figured that they would go ahead and try to control the cities, which they do, and they destroy the cities, but they don't care because remember, the creed of the Confederacy is keep the wealthy people wealthy, keep the poor poor. And this sticks out during the Civil War when they made sure that people who owned at least 20 slaves, they didn't have to fight in the war. And if they worked for the Confederate government, they didn't have to fight for the war. And if they were wealthy people, they didn't have to fight in the war. The poor people had to fight in the war. The poor people had to give up 10 to 15 to 20% of all their goods that they had, their food and everything, just to feed the Confederate soldiers. But the people who had all the money and how the people didn't have to. And this movie, which is a true story, the free state of Jones, is you have to see this, because this is going to let you know who the Democrats are. Because the Democrats have not changed. Okay, let me just throw this little tidbit in. Who is the longest standing senator in U.S. history who had been reelected for some 50-some odd years? He was the leader of the Ku Klux Klan, Byrd, Senator Byrd of West Virginia. There must have been some Democrat support for him to keep getting reelected over and over again. And West Virginia actually wasn't part of the Confederacy. West Virginia seceded from Virginia, just like we're recommending in our divorce presentation that Eastern Washington secede from Western Washington. Eastern Oregon secede from Western Oregon. Okay, Route 5, go up Route 5 and there's your border area. The blue states want to be their own people. Okay, here, I'll give you Massachusetts, okay? The insurance, your auto insurance in Massachusetts is about 1.5 times more than what it would be in Florida. Okay, everything in Massachusetts costs more because they're run by Democrats, and Democrats need money. Democrats have to make all their money through government. That's why Barack Obama, the Clintons, and of course the Bidens are much more wealthier today than they were before they got into government. Because to them, that's how they make money. That's how they become rich, through power and influence and graft. It happens all the time. It's been going on for a long time. We're paying for it. It was nice to see that Donald Trump last night in his victory speech in Iowa made the comment that we're going to pay down our debt. And we're going to do it by drill, baby, drill. We're going to produce so much oil and so much natural gas, and we're going to ship that all over the world into Europe. You know, Europe says they're our allies. They're NATO. Well, they need gas and heat and everything, and they're having troubles now. We'll ship it to them. We'll ship it to them. Of course, we can't do that now because Biden doesn't want to, because Biden thinks that the future is electric cars. And let me tell you something. You want to get a good picture of the future of electric cars? Watch the news from yesterday in Chicago. There was a parking lot of, I believe, 20 Tesla rechargers. And everyone was packed up, okay? Because there was one thing that the Democrats, they kind of forgot to tell people. And that is that, these electric batteries that are in these electric cars, if you're living in Florida, no problem. But if you're living in Chicago and you have the car there during winter, the lifespan of that battery goes from 4 years to 2 years. And those batteries cost $1,500. So you're going to then have to spend, $15,000. you're going to have to spend $30,000 for batteries, depending on your vehicle. So here are these people, they're interviewing, they're all done with electric cars. The guy's sitting there going, I've been trying to charge this thing up for 2 hours. The batteries aren't recharging when they're that cold. And then some guy says, oh, there's a little button on the side of the battery that says reclimatizing or something. And so, and the rental car companies have decided that having electric cars is no good because the people don't want to be in an electric car because that limits them. And then if they have a problem, they have to get it charged up instead of just going to the gas station and getting gas. So the scam of the Green New Deal, just like the scam of solar panels and shit like that Obama did when he was in and getting money, the Democrats have to commit scams to make the money. And then they cost us so much. So we as Americans can sit back and hope that Trump gets reelected and that nothing happens to him during it. I doubt that because the Democrats are adamantly against him getting back into power. He did make a good point the other day on TV about retribution because, the Democrats like to take falsehoods and throw them at Republicans. And so, of course, at Trump, they were trying to say, hey, he's going to spend all his time coming after us. Well, first of all, you guys committed crimes. You all belong in jail or you belong in electric chairs, one of the two. Okay, I mean, to be honest, a good portion of Democrats in the government need to be strapped in and belted in. And let's see how they charge during the winter or during the summer. That's undoubtedly. But Trump made a really good point. And he said when he was being interviewed by Frocks and Friends, he said, well, they asked him about retribution, because, see, retribution is a term created by the mental lunacy of Democrats. Okay, if the Democrats are committing crimes, which they do all the time, okay, we've got plenty of them to show you. If the Democrats are committing crimes all the time, and then you get into power and you decide to put them in jail, oh, that's retribution. You can't do that. So what the Democrats do is the Democrats come up with a term and then they have their left-wing media spew it out over and over and over again, propaganda, Nazi propaganda, to be able to say, oh, retribution, retribution. So Trump knocked that one out of the park when they threw that softball at him. They thought it was going to be a fastball, but he smacked it out. And he said, I'm not going to have time for retribution. I'm going to be busy drill, baby, drill, and creating jobs. And he went through the whole list of things. And then he said, our success is going to be our retribution. That was a great line. I mean, that's Trump all the way. That's Trump all the way. But the Democrats aren't going to change. The Democrats never change. The Democrats haven't changed since they fired on Fort Sumter. So as I'm looking at this, I'm saying to myself, I don't think it's treason. Because if it's treason, it's the crime of betraying one's country. Well, the red is not the Democrats' country. The blue is. And the blue consistently steal money from the federal government while there's Democrats in power in Washington and in the Congress. Okay, $42 billion was stolen by COVID, by the fake COVID monies, and they used it for CRT and all this other Democrat dog shit that they do. There's no coming together. Okay, the only thing that's going to happen is Trump can bring the country together, but not completely. He'll never be able to take the Nazis and the communists and the Marxists and the progressive lunatics and the Middle East Palestinian terrorist squad of the Democratic Party. They will never cross over. Okay, they will never cross over. And we're going to show you videos in this presentation, which is going to be more than one show because there's too much to show you. but we've kind of nailed down the 5 or 6 people who are war criminals, because we believe that it's committed an act of war against us, and we can still give them the same thing, but it's not treason. They would have to be Americans to be committing treason, and these people are not. These people are not Americans. They're not. I don't care what anyone says. They don't act like Americans. Let me just read a bit of this to you. In the term casus belli, under the American Civil War, while long-term conflict between the northern and southern states, mainly due to moral questions caused by slavery, as well as socioeconomic disparities, was the cause of the American Civil War. The Confederate attack on Fort Sumter, April 12, 1861, served as casus belli for the Union. Historian David Herbert Donald concluded that President Abraham Lincoln's repeated efforts to avoid collision in the months between inauguration and the firing on Fort Sumter showed he adhered to his vow not to be the first to shed fraternal blood. But he also vowed not to surrender the forts. Now, I'm going to stop here because they use the term here, fraternal blood. The term was always brother versus brother in the Civil War. There were Americans fighting Americans. And in that case, on the battlefield, the soldiers were the same Americans. One fighting under freedom and the other fighting under tyranny to support the tyranny of the wealthy. They just didn't understand that. They did after a while. And that's when they began to leave the battlefield. But he also vowed not to surrender the forts. The only resolution of these contradictory positions was for the Confederates to fire the first shot, and they did just that. Confederate veteran William Watson opined in 1887 that up until that point, the U.S. Secretary of State, William H. Seward, had not been able to find just cause to declare war against the seceded states, but Sumter gave him the casus belli he had sought. Watson lamented how Jefferson Davis and other Confederate leaders were vaingloriously, I've never seen that word before, celebrating the victory at Sumter, while forgetting that making the first move had given the Confederacy the immediate internationally negative reputation of being the aggressor, and had granted Seward the undivided sympathy of the North. So, okay, I'm going to go back to you, and we're going to cover casus belli one more time so you understand it, because it's reasons for war. What gave us reasons for war? I think everything we've seen for so long has given us reasons for war. Let's go back here for 1 second. What do I do with that stuff? I can have 5 pieces of paper here, and all right. We're going to get rid of this, going to get rid of this. You know, it's amazing to think, and we're going to cover this in today's show, is that we have Americans sitting in a jail in the foreign country of the District of Columbia, yet we had Palestinians. Where did all these Palestinians come from? Is that part of the illegal immigration program to allow terrorists to come into the nation to destroy us? We're going to get to cover this in just a second about the Palestinians, but where did my casus belli go? Anyways, casus belli is the reason for war. It gives you a reason for war that you have to state why you go to war, why you did go to war. This is on Nixon. I mean, I got plenty of stuff. So this is a bit from the New York Times. Why are nations rushing to call everything an act of war? A long-range missile fired directly at your capital is generally considered an act of war, even under the strictest of definitions. So early in November, when a missile was fired from Yemen towards Saudi Arabia's Riyadh airport, there was little question on the matter. The Saudis have spent the past 2 years in an open war with the Houthi rebels responsible for the launch. This is in 2017. We're now in 2024, and the Houthi rebels are now firing at international shipments of oil and food and product, and that's an act of war. So what it says here is an act of war, or casus belli, is supposed to be an action that justifies a military response, something along the lines historically of sinking a battleship or assassinating an archduke. So what is the actual cause of action that justifies we, the American people, to have a military response? Now, we don't have an army. Yes, we have a U.S. Army, but the U.S. Army is under control of the invading forces, okay? The same people who are allowing millions of illegal immigrants to come in the country with all diseases and everything they want, and giving them $5,000 gift cards and bus passes and airline tickets, free hotels. I mean, it's beyond belief, but there's reasons for what they're doing. These are future, what I believe, SEIU, which is a service union organization of 2 million people that work low-level jobs. Okay, so now you're going to have 10 million new SEI union people. They're all going to be signed into the union once they're made American citizens illegally by the Democratic Party. And the interesting thing is, Newsom, governor of California, assigned this woman, a black woman who's also a lesbian. The Democrats always score people based on their DEI scores, because you don't hire people for what they know or what their experience is. You hire them for how many votes you're going to get from the people that are just like them. Everything's to deal with votes. Well, she happens to also be the leader, the executive in charge of SEI Union, and she's also the executive of Emily's List, which is a pro-abortion organization to get women elected to power. Everything is Democrats. Everything is tied to Democrats. Yes, I know there doesn't seem to be a Democratic organization for white men, because white men suck as far as they're concerned. You'll notice in 2012 when Obama was cleaning his political party of white people, that all the organizations in every county of Democrat organizations, there were all these organizations for specific people, but nothing covering white men, because white men are considered the enemy, and that's why the term white supremacy is the biggest threat to the United States. No, Democrats are the biggest threat to the United States. So what do we have that lets us decide that we have a right or reason to go to war with the Democrats? I think there's quite a few of them. We're going to cover them, but I came across something really interesting. As you know, if you listen to bird brain Kamala Harris talk about anything with her word salads, that the January 6th attack on the Capitol was worse than 9/11. Now, of course, 9/11, there was 3,000 people killed. On January 6th, it was actually one person killed, and that was a white woman killed by a black police officer, but that's okay. But if you have a white police officer killing a black man, it's the big deal. I want to point something out to you. When President Trump was running for re-election in 2020, did we see all these rallies and riots by Antifa and Black Lives Matter, which actually I believe stands for Black Lesbians Matter? If you look at what they really do, Black Lives Matter didn't matter to them, only putting money in their pockets and their mansions. They were a complete scam. They took over quite a bit of the, I remember watching English soccer, and they had the, take a knee for racism and all that shit they were spewing, and then the NFL still carries it, fight racism. You're talking about a sport where I guess 78% of the players are black. Okay, so if they're fighting racism, why don't they say, okay, here's a new rule. 3 white players have to be on the field for each team during every play. Why don't they say something like that? Why doesn't the NBA say something like that? Huh? Aren't they trying to fight racism? Huh? Or is that okay? Is that not racism? But on the other side, it always is considered racism. The mentality of these people makes no sense except for the fact that they're out to control our country, control our wallets, make us working slaves, which is what we are. Okay, you gotta remember, the Democratic Party, the Confederates, came to the conclusion that, okay, if we can't keep blacks as slaves, then we're going to keep everybody as slaves. And that's why they came up with the 1913 16th Amendment for the income tax. Palestinian protesters. Something's very interesting. And that is, I happened to be watching the movie Golda the other day. It's about Golda Meir, who was the Prime Minister of Israel during the Yom Kippur War of 1973, which happened to be 50 years ago. And then Hamas attacked Israel on the 50th anniversary of the Yom Kippur War. They figured, hey, that's a good time. Let's attack again. There was something about that attack that didn't make sense. Number one, I'm just pointing some stuff out. I draw conclusions based on logic. That's how I do things. That's my legal mind. And I don't say anything I can't present in court. That's how I look at these things. When we first started this show, it was called America's Court of Public Opinion, because I was presenting stuff in a legal format to educate the American people on why they need to understand our nation is under attack by the Confederacy, the Democrats, which it is. We know that. So I'm reading all this stuff about the Palestinians, and my first thing is, where the hell did all these people come from? How could there be hundreds of thousands of these Palestinians all set to attend these rallies and strikes and demonstrations? Where did they come from, and how were they organized? And they must have been prepared prior to October 7th. So just like the Democrats knowing what was going to happen on January 6th, years before it happened, I believe the same people, the Democrats and their Palestinian terrorist organization, congressional group, had these things all planned ahead of time. It just, let me tell you something, they were there ready in 3 days. And the understand when we are being attacked, it's not a, hey, we were driving by, we thought we'd shoot you. No, it doesn't work that way. The way it works is, hey, we're going to come by and we're going to kill 200 of your people, and we're going to make sure that you're blamed for it. And then we were just driving by, and we're going to have all this stuff to prove that we're innocent. Just like when we stole the 2020 election. Okay, within 2 weeks of the election, we had black organizations suing Trump for racism because we knew he was going to point out the fact that we committed the election fraud in the black communities, because that's the easiest place to go, right? Detroit, Fulton County. Okay, is there a reason why they were making sure that they had black female attorney generals and district attorneys pulling this? Because they play the race card every single day. They're the racists. We're not. So, where'd all these Palestinians come from? And the interesting part is that this deal began within 3 to 4 days after these assholes go in and they attack unarmed people, killing their children and their families and burning these people alive, cutting off the heads of children. I mean, these people are lunatics and need to be removed from the planet. And that's what's happening now. These people are being removed from the planet for good. For good. Okay. But they knew that their strategy is attack Israel and then we'll get him to calm down. Then we'll attack him again. And then we'll get him to calm down. Then we'll attack him again. We'll just keep going. We'll just keep going. That's a great plan. This time, the Israelis said, gay cocking, which is Yiddish for go shit. They're not stopping. They're going to wipe them out, and that's the end of that. And that's the purpose for these rallies, these protests, Palestinian protests. And you sometimes, I'm sorry, but some of us are so busy trying to live life and try to make a living for ourselves that we don't normally catch all this shit that's going on. At least 320 pro-Palestinian protesters arrested after blocking traffic across New York City bridges. Now, why would the Palestinian protesters attack New York? Hey, you got lots of Jews in New York, yeah. More than 1,000 protesters stood hand-to-hand halting ongoing traffic. Okay. That's January 8th. Largest pro-Palestinian protest in U.S. history was a turning point. Now it's spreading. This is November 17th, 2023. Okay. Felt like this was a new wave or a turning point in the struggle for Palestine. Okay, first of all, if you're going to have a struggle for Palestine, stop making it fake. And the reason why the struggle for Palestine is fake, because the Arab nations don't give a shit about the Palestinians. If they did, they'd say, okay, let's fix this once and for all. Okay, where is Palestine? Can anybody tell us where Palestine is? No, it's not in Israel. Wrong. No, it's not from the river to the sea. No, that's just a $7.50 statement they like to keep making. No, Palestine is actually in what you would refer to as Syria and Jordan. Really? Yeah. They back in around the World War I, when all this global horse shit began, with the help of the Democratic Party. Remember, they had to pass the 16th Amendment so they could tax the shit out of us, and then of course they had to pass the Federal Reserve Act, so they have a central banking system to collect and hold all our money and then send it overseas whenever they need it. We ate $15 billion because of World War I. I still to this day don't understand why we fought in World War I, because the war wasn't over here. And they sure as hell didn't have anything to be able to reach us with. That's just a Democrat program is foreign wars. Okay, well, let's say like Ukraine. Okay, so Biden's evidently been getting paid by Ukraine ahead of time for when he was going to become president, because I guess they understood he was going to become president because that was the plan, that was the steal, and Iran was behind it and China was behind it. All the buddies of the United States were assisting the Democrats in stealing an election, which either A, makes them traitors or just makes them part of the international cabal against American freedom and American people. And that's what I believe. So now here it is, the largest pro-Palestinian protest in U.S. history was a turning point. Now it's spreading. Okay, I'm not going to go into details. It's a story about all this other stuff. But as I was saying, it's fake. And the reason why it's fake is because, first of all, let me just say to you, I believe that there should be a Palestinian state, and it should be where Palestinia is. And I said Palestinia because in 60 AD, the Romans were screwing around with the Middle East, and they came up with an area of territory, and they called it Syria Palestinia. Now, when you hear that they called it Syria Palestinia, did Do you think that maybe it was in Judea? No, because Judea was Judea, Mike. Couldn't be. Was Syria, Palestine in Jordan? No, it wasn't in Jordan. Syria, Palestine wasn't in Egypt either. Syria, Palestine must have been in Syria. And actually, it crossed over into parts of Jordan. So if you were going to have a homeland for the Palestinians, you would have the homeland where their homeland was. And the Jews, they're having their homeland where their homeland is, Judea, Samaria, Israel, because, it's kind of been named Israel since the beginning of time. Children of Israel, the children of Israel. So the question is, why did the British, when they started screwing everything around during World War I, decide to split Israel into Israel and Palestine when it had nothing to do with Palestine? Palestine had nothing to do with Israel. That's just what they wanted to name it. But why didn't the British say, well, okay, here, let's look at history. Palestine is between Lebanon and Jordan, and that's the southern part of Syria, north of the Golan Heights, which I believe were always part of Judea and Samaria, which is Israel, and it is now. Why did they not make Palestine where Palestine was? Why didn't they do that? Well, because the Syrian government and the Jordanian government were real close, and they said, you want us to fight for you in World War I and be in your support, so we want you to shove it up the Palestinians' ass and take away their homeland, and we'll forget about it. We won't even bring it up. We'll go ahead and put fake history shit into all Wikipedia and everything, trying to give people the belief that Palestine's in Israel, when it isn't. Okay, there's no reason for a two-state solution. Okay, because Israel is not half Palestinian, half Israel. It's Israel. Always has been Israel. Palestine has always been Palestine, but they just don't want the Palestinian people to have their own homeland. I believe they deserve their own homeland. These people have been through enough bullshit for so long. You can understand their frustration. They're just believing in the wrong people. Okay, and these people have been putting up with shit for a long time, and the Israelis actually are going to clean Gaza out. They're going to get rid of all these Hamas scumbags and set it up so that Gaza can become a free nation, build an empire. They're on the Mediterranean. Okay, beaches, hotels, tourism. Okay, do you think that Saudi Arabia and Dubai and all those beautiful places on the planet are there because of oil only? No, it's because of the tourism. People go to Dubai and in Saudi Arabia and the beautiful beaches and the water. And so the same thing can happen for Gaza. But Gaza is not Palestine. Gaza is a separate country, and it's been there for quite a long time. Long time. Gaza has always been supposedly to be an independent country. It can still be an independent country. The Israelis have no interest in Gaza because they have Tel Aviv, and they've got their connection to the Mediterranean for their hotels and stuff. So all of this bullshit is a scam. They're scamming the Palestinian people. And so now they've got them here in the United States. And where did all these people come from? How did all of this, okay, let me just read a couple things. Global Day of Protest draws thousands to D.C. March for Gaza rallied thousands to D.C. How come none of them were arrested? And how come then they weren't put in jail? Is it because they're not Americans and therefore they aren't allowed to be arrested for committing obstruction of judicial proceedings? Why are Americans in jail? Okay, there's just so much here, and I don't want to get too into it, but it's there. If you want to read about it, you can read about it. But you got to ask the question: why aren't the Palestinians in jail, and Americans are? Huh? What's going on? What are we as Americans? What are we missing? What's going on? Now, as you know, Kamala the Brain Dead was telling us that January 6th was worse than 9/11, was worse than Pearl Harbor. Holy shit, is she dumb, huh? I'm holding in my hand the list of the six most violent uprisings in the United States. Okay? Out of the six, where do you think the January 6th fake insurrection occurred? Okay? Was it 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, or 6? Which ones? Okay, well, let me give you, you can hold your breath and see if your guess was right. 6 violent uprisings in the United States. Get the facts on 6 of the most famous domestic disputes in American history. Okay? This was originally written in 2014. It was updated on October 4th, 2023. October 4th, 2023. Okay, the first one is the Wilmington Insurrection of 1898. On the morning of November 10th, 1898, a throng of some 2,000 armed white men took to the streets of the southern port town of Wilmington, North Carolina. Spurred on by white supremacist politicians and businessmen, the mob burned the offices of prominent African-American newspapers, sparking a frenzy of urban warfare that saw a dozen of blacks gunned down in the streets. As the chaos unfolded, white rioters descended on City Hall and forced the town's mayor to resign along with several black aldermen. By nightfall, the mob had seized full control of the local government. Some 60 black citizens lay dead and thousands had fled the city in panic. While it took the form of a race riot, the Wilmington Uprising was actually a calculated rebellion by a cabal of white business leaders and Democrat politicians intent on dissolving the city's biracial, majority Republican government. Once in power, the conspirators banished prominent black leaders and their white allies from the city and joined with other North Carolina Democrats in instituting a wave of Jim Crow laws suppressing black voting rights. Despite its illegality, state and federal officials ultimately allowed the power grab to proceed unchecked, leading many historians to cite the Wilmington insurrection as the only successful coup d'etat in American history. Democrat white supremacists, huh? Don't you find it amazing that the Democrats try get everyone to believe that white supremacy is a Republican thing? Huh? Don't you think it's about time that shit stopped? Number 2, New York City draft riots. Okay, now we probably saw these on that movie with, I can't remember the name of it, but they had the draft riots in New York City. It'll come to me. Only 10 days after the Union victory at the Battle of Gettysburg, New York City became embroiled in the largest popular insurrection in American history. The incident began on the morning of July 13th, 1863, when hundreds of young men poured into the streets to protest the federal draft lottery. New York was deeply divided over the Civil War, and many viewed the conscription law, which excluded blacks and allowed wealthy men to buy their way. Oh, it allowed wealthy men to buy their way out of serving for $300. As a blatant civil rights violation. The bedlam would continue for 4 days as rioters looted businesses, torched buildings, and brawled with police and National Guardsmen from behind makeshift barricades. Convinced that free blacks were a threat to their livelihood. Rioters also beat and lynched several black men, demolished the homes of others, and even set a black children's orphanage ablaze. So, do you think Republicans did this? Or did Democrats do this? They were Democrats. Okay. Tammany Hall. Okay, very corrupt Democrat-run organizations. The Democrats in the North, the Democrats in the South, constantly attacking black people. Why? Because that's their deal. If you really looked at the history of this country, you'd be amazed at all the shit that went down attacking black people all over the place, all over. And a lot of times it occurred during election day. That's why it drives me nuts that you have these black people supporting the Democrat crimes when the crimes are basically against them and they don't realize it. They're being used as fools and tools. Battle of Blair Mountain, number 3, in 1921. The winding hills of southwest West Virginia, played host to the largest and bloodiest labor dispute in American history. At the time, the coal-rich region operated under the thumb of powerful mining interests who employed thuggish private detectives to harass any workers who tried to unionize. Tensions boiled over in August 1921 after company agents assassinated a pro-union lawman named Sid Hatfield. Hatfield and McCoys? In response, as many as 15,000 miners, many of them World War I veterans, armed themselves and set off to confront the coal tycoons and organize their fellow workers. When they approached Blair Mountain in Logan County, the army of miners clashed with the force of around 3,000 defenders marshaled by an anti-union sheriff named Don Chafin. As the miners advanced up the mountain, they were met with punishing rifle and machine gun fire. And Chafin's forces even used a small air force of biplanes to drop explosives and tear gas. The miners' defeat derailed union activity in the region for over a decade. Some 1,000 workers were later charged with crimes including conspiracy, murder, and treason. Okay, that's the top 3. There's only 3 more. Which one is January 6th insurrection in, huh? So now, if you figure that the January 6th insurrection was one of the first 3, you're wrong. So now, you want to take another guess? Would it be number 4, number 5, or number 6? January 6th insurrection, which Kamala Harris said was worse than the bombing of Pearl Harbor, 9/11. Number 4, Richmond bread riots. By its 3rd year, the Civil War had taken a bitter toll on the Confederacy's civilian population, with their supply lines choked off and inflation soaring. Notice how inflation's always soaring when Democrats are in power. Inflation actually killed the Confederacy, not just the fact that Democrats were running it into the toilet. The largest of these bread riots unfolded in the Confederate capital of Richmond, Virginia, on April 2nd, 1863. A group of armed, half-starved women descended on the state capitol and demanded to speak to Governor John Letcher. When Letcher shrugged off their concerns, the hoop-skirted mob marched down one of the city's major thoroughfares, commandeered several supply carts, and began violently ransacking warehouses for food. The rioters' numbers quickly grew into thousands as more desperate men and women took to the streets, many of them chanting bread or blood. Ignoring the protests of city officials, they broke down the doors of private businesses and supply houses and made off with food, clothing, jewelry, and other valuables. According to some accounts, Confederate President Jefferson Davis even addressed the crowd, tossing coins at rioters and pleading, "You say you are hungry and have no money. Here is all I have." Some 60 members of the mob were arrested, and the city would later place artillery pieces in Richmond's business district as a warning against future uprisings. Okay, now we're down to 2. Number 5, Battle of Athens. In 1946, a group of veterans and disgruntled citizens went to war with the local government of Athens, Tennessee. The small farming community had spent the 1940s dominated by a crooked political machine led by sheriff and legislator Paul Cantrell, who was known to rig elections in his favor through ballot stuffing and voter intimidation. Sounds like Democrats to me. Corruption ran rampant until 1945 when hundreds of young men returned to Athens fresh from the battlefields of World War II. After they experienced repeated harassment by law enforcement, the XGIs the XGI's own political party ran several veterans for local office in the hopes of ousting Cantrell and his cronies. The battle unfolded during a tense election day on August 1st, 1946, when the veterans accused Cantrell of vote fraud, yada, yada, yada. And number 6, the 6th most, what's the term? Violent, the 6 most violent uprisings in the United States is, of course, yes, the January 6th insurrection by Donald Trump and 47 million Americans. January 6th insurrection resulted in the death of one person. The white woman shot by a police officer. She was unarmed. The police officer, black police officer, was not unarmed, and nothing happened to him. Really? That doesn't sound right. Okay, it wasn't the January 6th insurrection. The January 6th insurrection wasn't shit compared to history. This was Shays' Rebellion, number 6. In the years following the Revolutionary War, the United States plunged into a severe economic crisis. Tensions were especially high in Massachusetts. Yada, 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 yada. Massachusetts Governor James Bowdoin responded by mustering a 1,200-strong militia led by former Continental Army General Benjamin Lincoln. Shays' forces set their sights on the Federal Armory at Springfield, Mass. Tax disputes later led to both the Whiskey Rebellion in the 1790s and the Fries Rebellion in 1799. Tax rebellion, huh? Who would have a problem with taxes? I'm sorry, but the insurrection of January 6th basically is a walk in the park of federal agents dressed as Trump supporters. There was about 200 of them. And the final on that issue hasn't settled yet. Okay, so January 6th was bullshit. We know it was bullshit. So we know that it's possible that the second phase of the war between the states, war between the red states and the blue states, kind of changed a bit, huh? No longer the blue and the gray. The Democrats didn't want to be considered the red states because red is communism and the Reds are communists and the Democrats are communists. Communist Confederates, kind of the same concept. I don't know if you want to believe that freedom was part of the Confederacy, but it sure as shit didn't seem to be that way to the people. These people were stepped on. And so, how many times must America be attacked before we go to war to stop it? We are here today in this court of public opinion to determine what criminal warlike actions have been committed against the American people and what should be a calculated and finite response by the American people be. I think we all recognize that we can't continue this way. We had 4 years of Carter, and we thought that was bad. We had 8 years of the Clintons, 8 years of Obama. I don't know how we got 8 years of Bush, but we sure as hell couldn't have 8 years of Trump. No, couldn't have that. We couldn't even have 4 years of Trump. They attacked him from day one. From day one. I don't know when the Democrats are going to become part of this nation. I don't think they ever will. You're going to see videos that we're going to get to of Democrats like Congressman Raskin from Maryland, Congressman Schiff from Shit Up the Ass, California, Nancy Pelosi, Hillary Clinton. Barack Obama is a separate deal. Barack Obama is a whole different ballgame, and he's separate from these actions. because the deal on Obama is going to have to be, that's a couple of shows. I already know most of it because I've already been doing this stuff before. But a lot of you have no idea what happened to make sure he became a senator. You know, there's somebody with a lot of power, and I'm sure they were involved with Perkins Coie, the law firm that was created in 1912 when all this shit started. So here's some questions. I'm going to throw these out to you. You're watching this show. Well, it's 10:30 now, so we've been doing this for a little over an hour. It's unfortunate that it doesn't show the time on this software as how long we've been covering. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to get to this part, and then we're going to stop here, and then the next segment of this show, which will be next week, we're going to get into the particulars. So basically, we're going to summarize this stuff up. What questions should we as patriotic and loyal American citizens ask? Was the murder of 1 million American senior citizens with the deployment of the Wuhan China virus established to provide $250 billion in Social Security for the invasion of 10 million illegal aliens, criminals, foreign troops, and cartel drug employees, etc., to join the SEIU public union, which is led by the recent addition of the newest California senator, who happens to be in charge of that union. Okay? Is there a concerted effort by the progressive Confederate Democrat Party to steal every election, to inhibit the leadership of Republican presidents elected to office, including assassination, to ascertain constant political power, and rule over a once free people? What is the purpose of indicting President Trump 4 times on criminal actions actually committed by Joe Biden, Hillary Clinton, and Barack Obama? You know the theory: attack your opponents for what you do. Blame these actions on them. Okay, if you commit a crime, if you stab 10 people, you charge your opponent with killing 10 people. Joe Biden, Hillary Clinton, Barack Obama have never been indicted on anything except, Hillary was close to it, but these people get away scot-free. So the question is there a two-tiered justice system in this country? The answer, of course, is yes. One for Americans and one for the Confederate Democrats. Are the Confederate Democrats an invading force that are controlling? Are they like aliens from outer space that came down and took over the country? What the frick is the deal? Why does the FBI have a history of working with these people? What happened? 4, Pelosi filed false impeachment claims against Donald Trump after the January 6, 2021 fake Confederate FBI insurrection to permeate the belief that it resulted in the 14th Amendment Section 3 violation, that Trump would be prevented from re-election. We saw that in Colorado. Colorado's trying to say that Trump violated the 14th Amendment, Section 3, which says that if you commit an insurrection against the American people, you can't hold office. First of all, it had nothing to do with the presidency, number one. Number two, Trump was never found guilty in a court of law for any of this. Therefore, it doesn't exist. It doesn't exist. When I say it doesn't exist, the purpose for this doesn't exist. It's not, it's fake. It's all fake. It's all fake. They're just trying to use their strength, which is their media, to lie to the American people over and over and over and over and over and over and over again, just like the Nazis did. They're trying to prevent Trump from getting reelected because they can't defeat him in an election. They can't. They couldn't defeat him in 2020 unless they created 15 million fake ballots, and they had to use the deal with the COVID as part of the program. But I think also COVID was designed to kill off senior citizens, because they killed off 1.3 trillion people, and you'll see this we've shown this before in other shows. We'll show this again. The 1.3 million Americans that were killed due to COVID, supposedly, 300,000 of them were under the age of 50, and 1 million were over the age of 50. And that's how I calculated the $250 billion that is no longer being paid out to these people because they're dead. And if it went to their spouses were probably dead because of the same thing, because they all caught it and diseased. And it gives kind of credence to why Democrat governors in Michigan and New York decided to go, oh, come on, put these sick people in with these old people, kill them all off. You know, they could have been put at the Javits Center. They could have been put on the hospital boat that Trump sent up to New York. New York didn't even use it. No, we don't need that. We have to kill off these elderly people so we can keep money. Pelosi filed impeachment claims against Donald Trump after the January 6, 2021 fake Confederate FBI insurrection to permeate the belief that it resulted in the 14th Amendment Section 3 violation that Trump would be prevented from re-election. Okay. Why did the American media not question this action by Pelosi? When it was to Trump's benefit to allow the joint congressional action to take place, which would have resulted in Trump being re-elected in the House by a vote of 17 to 21. Okay, so we're not in the White House with Barack Obama, but we're probably in his conference room in his mansion or whatever the hell you want to call it in Washington, D.C., where he runs the country. Everybody else wants to get the hell out of Washington, D.C. You know, he buys a place in Washington, D.C. besides a compound in Martha's Vineyard so he could kill off his chef. Like every, it's only the third death of somebody connected to someone in the Democratic Party running for president. Michelle Obama, you mean? Yeah, he knew something. He knew something, probably got pissed off, and they decided, okay, so it's just a coincidence that Mary Jo Kopechne was drowned in the same area, 7 feet of water, by Ted Kennedy, and it was an accident. Yeah, it was an accident. How do you let some woman drown in 7 feet of water when you're with her? Oh, the car went off the bridge and we're in 7 feet of water. Well, let's see, you're 6 feet, so you're telling me that a 1 foot of water you couldn't have jumped up or stepped onto the car, right? Remember, there's a car there. You could have stepped on the car to breathe and then go in and pull her out. You didn't try to save her, you killed her. It's murder. So that's one murder. JFK Jr. Unfortunately for JFK, he wasn't a radio talk show host like I was. If he was a radio talk show host, Hillary Clinton would have got rid of him by having him taken off the air by the FCC, like she did to me. See, I made the mistake of challenging her for the Democratic primary in Massachusetts for Ted Kennedy's seat. Oh, shit. She didn't want to have anything of that. She has to become president. And to become president, she's got to win a U.S. Senate race, just like Barack did, okay? And they fixed Barack's race so he could win. That's going to be another show. That's going to be covered when we go into Barack Obama. Okay, and the title of that show is, Who the Fuck is Barack Obama? Who is he? How was he created? He's a creation of something. We're going to get into that shit. So, there's got to be a meeting somewhere where they're planning all this shit out. They're saying, okay, we're going to have to do this to make sure Trump doesn't get reelected, and then we're going to have to do this to make sure he can't get elected in the future. Okay, but we know that they're going to know that we stole the election because everything was so obvious. But our media is going to go, I don't know what they're talking about. There was no stealing. It was the most secure election in American history. There's more evidence of the crime than you can imagine, but when you control the media and you control the FBI, No comprende, senor. So, well, let's see. So, what are we going to do? Okay, so we stole the election, but there's still one more thing we have to do. You see, like the compromise of 1877, in 1876, there was an issue with the electors and the majority of the electors, and so the election had to go into the House. Okay, had to go into the House of Representatives for a vote, and they came up with a conclusion or a deal with the Democrats that said, okay, we're going to end Reconstruction, and we're going to pull U.S. troops, federal troops, out of the South, so you people can go keep giving black people shit. Because we know you. That's what you love to do. You love to treat black people like shit. It's in your blood. I don't know where those people come from. But that was the deal. So the Democrats said, okay, we'll let you have Georgia. I think it was Louisiana, South Carolina, and Florida, those 3 states. We're going to let you have the votes for those states, and therefore, what's his name will be elected president of the United States in 1876, and it was the Compromise 1877 that they came up with that. But we can't have that happen now because we know that Trump's people are going to present challenges to the electors of 6 states where election fraud was obvious, and sure as shit, there were 6 signed, documented complaints of election questioning of the electors for Arizona, Nevada, Georgia, Michigan, Wisconsin, and Pennsylvania. The suck your ass 6. And so they were going to get thrown out. And then there would be no majority for Biden, because the fraudulent states that they say he won that he didn't win would no longer be in existence for electors. And so the election would have to go into the House of Representatives, and Trump would have won 27-21, with the states of Michigan and Pennsylvania not being able to vote because they had the equal amount of representatives. They both had 9 representatives in Pennsylvania, and I believe they both had 6 in Michigan. So, or 8. They had 16. So, hold on a second. We got a problem. We're going to have to come up with something to do to keep that from happening. We can't allow Trump to be reelected after all this bullshit we've gone through to make sure we stole the election. We killed off 1.3 million Americans so we could create this need for fake, phony mail-in ballots. We printed up 15 million fake ballots. We created these mules to go around and bring the votes of dead people and people that didn't exist anymore. And of course, black people that weren't going to vote for Biden, they're still going to vote for Biden. They just don't know it. They just don't know it. That's why we had GBI. They were going to go in and fix all of that stuff around. That's why they got paid $5 million. And that's why they were operating in 20 states. Why were they operating in 20 states? Why were they operating in 20 states?
Because it was going to be a landslide, you see.
When there's a landslide, you got to fight every state. Every state. So they're sitting there and they're planning all this shit. And they planned January 6th. And that's why there is documented proof that the FBI and some kind of domestic terrorism organization was trying to employ the Proud Boys and the Oath Keepers to act as insurgent spies. Okay, and that's why there was over 200 FBI agents dressed as Trump supporters to give you the impression that there was an insurrection. So all this bullshit could occur. And the key thing was to keep the joint session of Congress from being able to vote like this. Matter of fact, when you read through, if you go on January 6, 2021 congressional record, you'll read all that stuff. We've already done a show on it. You want to go back? I've got it covered already. And how Nancy Pelosi made these changes so that not everybody could be on the floor at once to overrule what was going on. Because they said,
well, because of COVID, we were going to make sure that none of us get sick,
even though none of us did get sick for some reason. Oh, that's right. We're not old. Yeah, we know all the senior citizens were going to be killed off. So, January 6th was a scam. We know it was a scam. So now here's another question. Who instructed the counting of votes in the fraudulent election states? Who instructed the counting of votes in the fraudulent election states of Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania, Georgia, and Arizona be stopped at the same time at 11 o'clock? Why were hundreds of thousands of Joe Biden votes delivered at 3 a.m. after the legal time for voting had expired in the states of Michigan and Wisconsin? There's videotape of it when they came in. That's not a questionable. Why were the videos of the election fraud occurring in Fulton County not considered valid proof of election fraud? Why were the two black women, mother and daughter, shown on the videos committing the fraud awarded medals by Joe Biden in the White House? And why were they both given $1 million awards in a defamation lawsuit filed against Rudy Giuliani when what he stated was true and proven by the video? The way that works is the black women wanted to become wealthy and become millionaires for not turning in the Democrats for the fraud they had them commit. So they had to sue Rudy Giuliani in a fake court of law and award them millions of dollars. And of course, Biden had to invite them to the White House to continue to commit the fraud. Remember, fraud doesn't end on day one. Fraud continues and continues. Okay. Accessory after the fact adds more people to continue to get you to believe that something happened that didn't happen, or to get you to believe that something that did happen didn't happen, and you're just screwy. What's interesting is there's also now a lawsuit in Fulton County, supposedly because Trump made a phone call. He's the only man in American history to be arrested or be indicted for making a phone call. One to Ukraine, one to Georgia. Not in the Russian area, that Georgia, the state of Georgia. Okay. I see stuff. I watch television. I see the news. My brain absorbs it all in and calculates it. It's just the way I am. That's why I was really good in court, even though I wasn't an attorney, because I suck at passing tests. But I can kick the shit out of people with this. That's why they had me taken off the air and radio.
Well, can't have him on radio anymore.
Yes, Hillary, we'll get rid of him. All we need is an $8 million FCC waiver, and the radio station ownership will remove Wiley, and they'll never see him again. Of course, they didn't know this was going to happen in 1994. 30 years ago, they didn't know there'd be podcasting and online shit and everything like this. This is not a podcast, by the way. This is a video radio show. It's video radio. That's what this is. It's not a podcast. I'm not some idiot in the lower corner of the screen going,
Hey, see what he said? See what he...
Is there a coordinated effort to create a political schism with the use of black women to open the door for the presidential campaign of Michelle Obama in 2024? Now, this is a year old. I've said that Michelle was coming a year ago. You got to understand, if you understand how the Democrats work, you know they've already planned this shit out. They planned everything out. Why? Because they don't do anything else. Do they create jobs? Hell no. They create wars. They steal money from the American people, and they put the American people into debt. Okay. Those are all proven. This effort is anchored by the fraudulent trial against Donald Trump in New York by a black lesbian attorney general, a fraudulent trial against Donald Trump in Atlanta by a black female district attorney, who just released a video response defending her criminal actions of hiring her lover to file the charge against Donald Trump and pay him $1 million in fees, and she blamed it as black women. It's racism. Everything is racism. Is this why Gavin Newsom chose a black lesbian who's the leader of Emily's List and a pro-abortion organization, and the SEIU, a union to replace Dianne Feinstein, who says she will not seek re-election for the U.S. Senate. Why? Is it because they've already chosen Adam Schiff, the most congenital liar in American history? He suffers from Hillary Clinton's disease, and he's targeted to be a senator from California to destroy America, as reason for all California senators. The blue section of California. That's where all the people are lumped in. All right, this is going to be, we're going to finish this up because I think we're getting to about an hour and 90 minutes. In 2019, Mark Elias, the Russia hoax master for Hillary Clinton's campaign, filed false lawsuits against Democratic Secretary of States in Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania to give them cover to change the manner of the federal elections with the allowance of 15 million fraudulent ballots that would have been disqualified had those states followed the law, thus committing election fraud for the 2020 election of Joe Biden and 4 U.S. Senate seats. Don't forget the 4 U.S. Senate seats. Okay, what does a fraudulent ballot look like? It's real simple. The fraudulent ballot has a vote for the presidency and a vote for the senator in that state. Because you see, you're not just stealing an election for the presidency, you're stealing the election for 4 Senate seats. But Mike, how come the fraudulent vote didn't choose a congressional candidate? Because if they chose a congressional candidate, you would go,
Wait a minute, we're getting too many votes in this county.
there's more people voting than there were registered voters, which happened in 2020, but nobody's gone after them. So a fraudulent ballot will always only show the president choice and the Senate choice, because the idea is to steal both. This tactic was employed in 2012 in the state of Florida when Barack Obama was running, and none of those votes had. There was like 500,000 more votes for Obama for president, and 500,000 more votes for the U.S. Senate candidate, Democrat Senate candidate, than those accumulated by the congressional Democrats. How did they do that? So in 2019, Mark Elias did his trick, thus committing election fraud in the 2020 election of Joe Biden and 4 U.S. Senate seats. Why has the media not presented this obvious fraud as documented in the January 6, 2021 congressional record for the overturning of 5 state electors and moving the election to the House of Representatives as was done in 1876? Why do we in this country not have an American media? Don't you think it's time we got one? Don't you think it's time we got one? In 2019, Nancy Pelosi initiated a false impeachment of Donald Trump based on a phone call to the newly elected Ukrainian president, who Democrats believe Ukraine is entitled to American taxpayer dollars to protect his country's borders, but not American borders. Trump has the authority as president to determine who gets what military equipment, and he has the right to request information regarding potential criminal activity of Joe Biden, which we all now would know is true. We knew he was doing it. Okay, but they tried to hide that shit from us. Okay, and part of the impeachment was to hide that stuff, but it was also because Trump did commit obstruction of justice. It should actually be called obstruction of injustice by the Democrats, because they were in the process of committing a crime of sending money to Ukraine for kickback schemes and whatever else they were into. Okay. I'm telling you, the Ukrainian deal is a lot more than you think it is. And I've already covered it. That show's done. It's up on Rumble. You want to go see it? I don't like covering these things over and over again. You guys just have to go back, watch the videos, and get caught up on this shit, because you need to get going. In 2016, Hillary Clinton, determined to be president of the United States, not caring who gets killed during her advance to power since 1994. She initiates the Russia hoax to demean Trump's character to gain an edge in the election. She fails. The results of the fake 2-year investigation known as the Mueller investigation determined that Trump has colluded with Russia. The whole 2-year action was a fraud designed to prevent Trump from having a successful presidency. But it still was one of the most successful presidencies in U.S. history, and he had to put up with all this shit. Just think what else he could have done if the Democrats didn't work to destroy his presidency. And so now the question is, are the actions of the Democrats to destroy a Republican president, historically they either assassinate them or they do something to make sure they can't go any further? We're going to cover a little bit about Richard Nixon, but we're going to run out of time, so we're going to do Nixon in the next show. Because the Watergate was a scam. And I've got the document. You got to understand something. I come up with a conclusion based on what I see. But then I have to go find the proof sources that prove I'm not full of shit. You know, I have to have a reputation of telling the truth and present stuff that makes sense. I can't just say anything to you that I don't have documentation for. That's stupid. You know, and I'm not going to play videos and just have me in the corner going,
Hey, see what they say? Oh, hey.
The fraudulent hoax involving FBI collusion was used to win the House for the Democrats, allowing them to file a fraudulent impeachment in 2019. Okay, 2005 to 2016, Barack Obama. That information is going to be presented on the show that we do for Barack Obama. And we're also going to do a separate show for Bill and Hillary Clinton because they have 8 years of multiple acts of treason or sedition or whatever you want to call it. Okay. Bill and Hillary Clinton probably would have been found guilty of treason versus being considered acts of war from another country. The Clintons are a special breed of criminal. Yeah, I said that. I don't care. 1972, Watergate scandal or Democrat landslide deterrent hoax. I'm just going to read this to you and you can start looking this shit up. President Richard Nixon had a 19-point lead in the May 1972 polls and was heading towards the largest landslide victory in American history, which did occur. Nixon had just finished a successful trip in China in February 1972 and a returning success in Moscow, and he came back on May 22nd, 1972. Did President Nixon instruct a group of misfits who were involved in the CIA bust of the Cuba invasion and the Kennedy assassination to sneak into the Watergate Hotel on May 27th, 1972, which nobody talks about? You almost never read about this. And having the Democratic Party headquarters bugged so Nixon could find out what the Democrats were going to do after losing in a landslide? Does it sound far-fetched? Why would you do that? You have a 19-point lead. You don't have to do a damn thing. How about the decision to send them back in and make sure they get caught this time on June 17th? Okay, and the day they got caught was the day the FBI got involved and immediately informed the Washington Post what they were doing. So the FBI, I believe, was tied into the media, and you have to have the Democrats were part of it. I mean, let's look at all the crimes they commit. Who's involved? Democrats, the media, the FBI. Democrats, media, and the FBI. You're going to see that all through the Bill and Hillary deals, FBI, media, and Democrats. Barack Obama, Democrats, media, and FBI. That is the collusion of criminal activity against the United States. And I don't know if it's, we can't do a RICO Act on them because RICO only goes to 10 years and their abuse of this nation is so far-fetched it's unbelievable. So I'm going to ask you this, and then we're going to come back next week and keep working on this, okay? So would the Democrats commit a fraud so they could file a phony impeachment against a Republican president who won 49 states with an 18% margin at election time? Huh? Remember, what does it mean when a Republican president takes 49 states? He didn't take Massachusetts. course, Massachusetts is Moscow Central, now Beijing Central. Do you think the Democrats could allow a president, a Republican president, who just committed the greatest landslide in American history to be allowed to operate as a president when he's doing all this good for the country? You can't have that happen. You can't have long-term periods of time where Republicans are doing well. That was the reason for the phony crash in 1929. The crash actually took place in 1931 after Democrats got elected into power thanks to the fake crash in 1929. We've already covered that. That's obvious. And I even went through in the last show I did to show you how I figured all this stuff out, and I found the documentation to prove that was right. So we're going to finish with this. Just make sure. Yeah, I actually, let me cover that. Yeah, I thought that was the 5th page. Hold on. Okay. Are Republican presidents guilty? Are Republican presidents guilty of being Republicans and thus are not entitled to the powers of the presidency? So no matter what they do, they can be found guilty of abuse of power? How many ways can you defeat a Republican president from winning re-election? That has nothing to do with the normal process of an election. You know, you have criminals that commit crimes over and over again, okay? They do the same modus operandi. We've watched the Democrats for how many years commit the same crimes over and 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 over, and no one does anything about it. Is the Democratic Party the opposition party or the sworn enemies of the American Republic? When you see in the next show, we're going to show you breakdowns and videos of Democrats in Congress. Listen to these pieces of garbage. These people will piss you off. If you haven't seen this stuff, you're missing it. Okay? You're missing it because it's so obvious that the Democratic Party is not American. They are not American. They're blue. Okay? And we're going to come to the conclusion that we already came to, and that is it's time for the great divorce. And that's going to be the next series of after we finish this up in the next show. Because I got to present you with more evidence. Just, I got to hate to hammer this over you, but how much longer will America put up with the illegal tax act of the 16th Amendment and the illegal Senate steal of the 17th Amendment? The state legislatures are supposed to be able to choose the Senate representatives, not millionaire donors from Europe. Was there never a peaceful surrender in 1865, or was the assassination of Republican President Andrew Lincoln and the subsequent placement of his vice president, Democrat Andrew Johnson, into the presidency to continue the next 130 years of Democrat mayhem against black Americans? How in God's name could black people ever support the Democratic Party? Okay, and the reason is because those Democrats, those black Democrats, are paid to be black Democrats for the Democrats, and it's their job to let black people know
The Democrats love us. You're to vote for them. See, I'm a Democrat. Oh, yeah, I am a millionaire, too. What a coincidence, huh?
And if so, what will Americans do about it? The republic is under attack, and it's obvious the Americans' greatest threat is not white supremacy, unless you are referring to the Democratic Party. Okay? I'm cutting the show off here now, and the next show we're going to go into, we have documentation and video on Adam Schiff and all the 7 billion lies he's committed. We've got a video of Raskin. He's a Democrat from Maryland. He's an escaped Looney Tune. And matter of fact, he's just had surgery for brain cancer. So maybe he wants to use that as an excuse for him being so out of space. Nancy Pelosi Hillary Clinton, Barack Obama, and Jerry Nadler as the Beaver. Yes, Jerry Nadler is in there too. We've got video of this piece of garbage. Remember, the Democratic Party employs two groups of people to attack America. White Jewish males and black females. It's obvious. And I should actually do a show on that because people go,
Oh, Mike, you're being anti-Semitic and racist.
yeah, that's what they want to say. But they're full of shit. And I'm not. You can always challenge everything I say. You can send me questions. The WileyInformationNetwork.com, www.wileyinfonet.com. Send me an email, ask any question, ask me to present any information for one reason or another of something you're interested in, and we'll take a look at it. So, the next show we're going to get into the details of the I can't say it's treason. I still haven't seen a real birth certificate of Barack Obama. So if he's not an American, then it's not treason. See, treason is committed by Americans. Okay, war is committed by non-Americans. That's, I think, what we have here. We've been at war. We just haven't been paying attention. But when you start putting it all together, all of a sudden you go,
Holy shit, Mike was right.
so, I love you. Have a good day. See you next week.